Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man that firmly believes that your bracket is already busted. Here is the captain.
Better get a good bracket if you can hack it. It's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Hold on to them horses, because this week we are featuring Order and Chaos from one of the very best brewers in all of the land, Tactical Brewing Company down in Florida. This week we are featuring Order and Chaos. This is a pina colada hazy IPA with pineapple, toasted coconut, Sabro, and Lotus hops, 6.2% ABV, garage grade. We're going to go with 4.5 bottle caps out of 5. And we want to give some praise and thank you to our friends for helping us fill up the fridge this week. First up, a big shout out to Yvonne in Glasgow.
And a big We Like Your Jib goes to Heather in Norcross, Georgia.
And last but certainly not least, we have Elizabeth and Jeremy, a double cheers. Elizabeth and Jeremy are in Dunedin, Florida. Everybody we just mentioned went to truecrimegarage.com and they clicked on that pint glass and helped us out with this week's beer run.
Yeah, if you like pina coladas, then go to truecrimegarage.com and donate to the beer fund. And if you're looking for the first 50 episodes, those are now available on our website store at truecrimegarage.com. Colonel, that's enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. It was a normal, balmy Florida night in September of 2010. 3 St. Johns County deputies were getting coffee at a Hess station in St. Augustine when a call came over the radio. Signal 18, shots fired. The 911 call came in just after 11:20 p.m. on September 2nd. The caller was screaming and panting. His girlfriend, Michelle, was unconscious on the floor. He sounded hysterical, to the point that the operator assumed he was a woman. "Please, get someone to my house. My girlfriend. I think she just shot herself. There's blood everywhere." When the operator addressed him as ma'am, the caller calmed down, and his voice changed, modulated, and lowered. He said, "Let me tell you the truth. I work with y'all." He identified himself as Jeremy Banks, a St. John's Sheriff deputy. But he quickly lost it again and started screaming at the operator to get someone there now. The deputies at the Hess station sped to 4700 Sherlock Place, arriving at 11:25 p.m. Deputy Maynard said when they pulled up to the house, the door was open. Walking into the kitchen, she glanced through an open door on the left and saw feet lying on the floor. Deputy Jonathan Hawley was already at the scene. He was in the room with the feet, a bedroom, crying, "Oh my God." For he knew the woman lying on the floor. They all did. She was Michelle O'Connell, Jeremy Banks' live-in girlfriend of over a year. She lay dying on the bedroom floor, a gunshot wound into the roof of her mouth, having penetrated her brain. This is Screams for Help, a close look at the suspicious death of Michelle O'Connell. And this is True Crime Garage. As we heard in today's trailer, Captain, the sheriff's department is already on the scene. Deputy Maynard stated that when she walked in, she witnessed fellow deputy Jeremy Banks huddled, crouching down, and about 3 feet from Michelle's body, cell phone in hand. He appeared almost catatonic. Then the sergeant at the scene said, quote, "We have a pulse." Jeremy's affect changed immediately, according to Deputy Maynard. He snapped to it and became almost angry. She took him outside and tried to calm him down. This is from the New York Times, which did 2 long exposés about this case. It reads, quote, "Ms. Maynard quickly escorted Mr. Banks, who had been drinking, out of the house. All of a sudden, he started growling like an animal," she said. With his fist, Mr. Banks pounded dents in a police car. Maynard called another deputy over to help her corral Jeremy. Quote, "I grabbed him and tuned him up." Another deputy, Wesley Grizzard, recalled, "I told him, I don't care if you're intoxicated or not, you better sober up."
Very strange actions for somebody that girlfriend just shot herself.
Very strange indeed, Captain. Now, we need to give a little background here. Jeremy Banks is a member of the sheriff's department. He's only 23 years old, and from what I can see, he appears to be a bit of a hothead, and his actions not always making sense in other situations, let alone this one, obviously. Deputy Maynard later said that the change in Jeremy's affect when a pulse was found, she found that to be very alarming. She said that she noticed he smelled like booze, but also smelled like soap and appeared to be clean. Paramedics tried to save Michelle for 23 minutes, but it was a lost cause. And unfortunately, she was pronounced dead at 11:48 p.m. that night.
Well, just to be clear, Jeremy is a deputy as well. So he has all the training that these deputies had. But when they came into the house and saw Jeremy there, he wasn't trying in any manner to use his training to save his girlfriend.
Now, spoiler alert, eventually Jeremy Banks will lawyer up. In that same scenario, that same line of questioning was asked of his lawyer. And his lawyer says, look, in that moment, I do not believe that my client, Jeremy, was behaving or in deputy mode at that moment. He was in boyfriend, citizen mode and probably unsure of what to do. Those are not his lawyer's exact words, but on many levels, I can agree with what his lawyer is stating.
But if your girlfriend is dying and you have training to help her, you would help her as her boyfriend. Doesn't matter if you're in deputy mode or boyfriend mode. Both people have the same training.
This will bring us to what we are going to refer to as Jeremy's first interview. This takes place an hour and a half later. This is now September 3rd at 1:23 a.m. And we have Detective Jessica Hines, who is interviewing Jeremy in a squad car outside of the house. And this is all being recorded on tape. Jeremy is telling the detective that he and Michelle were at the amphitheater for a concert earlier that night and saying that they did argue a little bit while they were there. He says, we argued a little bit earlier today, but nothing terrible. Just we were both fed up with each other's bullcrap that we've been dealing with. We've been together a year and some odd months. I enjoyed the show. She enjoyed the show. And in the car, we were talking about it. We had decided that we were going to break up. She was going to move out. Then on this tape, we have about 25 seconds that are missing. And it's noted that those 25 seconds have been deleted. Now, in all fairness, it could be just silence, radio silence during that 25 seconds. We don't know. He goes on to say that we came home and we weren't arguing when we got home. We got home and we talked about it. We just said, enough's enough. We've been fighting. We're done, and we're tired of each other's shit. And I told her that I do love her, and I love Alexis, her little girl. But I just don't feel like we're best friends anymore. It's not working out, and she agreed. And then he says this is when he goes and he sat on his motorcycle, which is located in the garage, and that's when he says, I heard the gun pop. The detective asked him to clarify. You were outside in the yard? ? The driveway? ? Jeremy's response, my motorcycle was in the garage. I was sitting on it with my head down, just upset about, the breakup. I heard it pop. I knew exactly what it was. Just instinct. I said, quote, oh shit. And I ran inside. I started screaming her name, and the bedroom door was locked. And I screamed her name again, and I heard it go off again for the second time. He's referring to the gun. I ran into the living room. I grabbed the phone, and I kicked the bedroom door in, and I found her, meaning Michelle, lying where she is. In this moment, they've not removed her from the scene. They tried to save her life for approximately 23 minutes or so, were unsuccessful, and now they are, I'm using air quotes here, processing the scene.
Obviously, Jeremy is upset. But to kind of break down this evening, from what Michelle's friends and family have said, that she told people, hey, I think we're going to break up, but I have these concert tickets. I already asked Jeremy to go. I think we're going to have a good time. So I'm just going to take him to the show, and I might actually break up with him that night. So like Jeremy's story, they start heading back from the concert. They start talking about their differences. They decide mutually this isn't working out, and she's going to have a week or so to move her stuff out of his house. But the rest of the story, obviously we don't know how true this story is because we only have one side. And then there seems to be some kind of contradictions, like when he says, oh, well, we're both kind of tired of our shit, but I'm going to be sitting on my motorcycle upset, basically with my head in my hands when he hears this gunshot go off.
Yeah, and then we have this interview, if you want to call it that continues on, and I thought that the parts that I could hear and have included here in our telling of this true crime story, I get it that they're colleagues and they've probably known each other for a handful of years or so. I thought that the detective was incredibly over-the-top casual in the questioning of Jeremy Banks. Now, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe she's trying to put on this persona and give off this vibe that, hey, you just experienced the worst thing possible. I'm going to keep it kind of light in this moment while we're recording. But I don't know. I found her to be a little too casual. It was a little uncomfortable for me to listen to the conversation, to be frank.
I agree with you on some level, but we have evidence of this Jeremy guy acting like a lunatic. They show up there. He is basically on top of the body. Once they get a pulse, he starts becoming angry and punching the cop car.
According to Deputy Maynard, yes.
Those are actions of somebody that, like you said, I mean, he has this known temper, so maybe her strategy was, I'm going to try to remain as calm as possible so I can keep him as calm as possible.
In the detective's vehicle, Detective Hines asked if Jeremy was drinking that night. Jeremy is forthcoming, saying, yes, I was drinking beer. Hines says, what kind? Jeremy says, Bud Light. Hines goes, ugh, and laughs. This is kind of what I meant here. Jeremy responds, big ones. I'm assuming he means the
Tall
big cans,
boys,
which
yeah.
you get at the concerts. Hines goes on to say, how many do you think you had? Jeremy says 4, 5, maybe. When he says big ones, I don't know if he's talking about 16 ounces or 22 ounces.
Well, that's what she said.
5 22 ounces is a lot of beer.
Yeah.
Hines asked Jeremy to describe what he did when he kicked the door open. Jeremy is crying during his response. or at least that's what I believe I'm hearing. He says, I kicked the door open and I kind of veered in and I saw her feet. I ran in, and by this point, he's crying hard. He says, I saw blood coming out and I just grabbed her hand and I dialed 911. Now, we need to point out here, Michelle was found with a gun lying next to her. And this gun is Jeremy's service weapon.
So we have a 911 call. We have the deputies showing up. They see one of their own over the victim. The victim appears that she shot herself. It's with his gun. And then once they get a pulse of the victim, the deputy that they know, the boyfriend, he starts acting erratic. And now they're doing this interview.
Correct. And I hate to keep kind of underlining this, but I think that it's important to do so, that behaving erratically is according to one deputy. I couldn't find anybody else backing up that statement. The closest I could find was the other deputy saying that he grabbed Jeremy up and told him, I don't care if you've been drinking, but you need to sober up.
Yeah, but there should be some evidence of this if he put dents in the cop car.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And maybe that's part of the problem, right? That evidence is not available to the general public, that evidence is being withheld or covered up.
Right.
It's worth noting that for most of the interview, in my humble garage opinion here, that while we can hear, or I believe I can hear Jeremy crying at times during this interview, for large portions of this interview, Jeremy does not sound sad at all to me. I never hear him say Michelle's name at any time. He does admit that he did not try to perform CPR or anything of that nature. He did say that he held her hand a little, but when first responders came in, he was not doing that. He was about 3 feet from Michelle. He also very strangely admitted to Detective Hines that he initially tried to obscure his identity in the 911 call. Now, this is weird. This is very strange.
Red flag.
Yeah, look, I've heard the 911 call, and that's what I thought he may have been doing. Or, again, in the moment, maybe he's not thinking clearly. Look, I thank God in heaven that I've never had to find myself in a situation like this. So I do not know how I would respond, how I would behave. I don't know that there is a common or typical way to behave in this scenario. But what's weird is that he is openly admitting this to the detective in this interview in her vehicle an hour and a half later.
Well, I think a lot of people assume that when you find a loved one that you're going to be hysterical. And that's what I think a lot of these people that call 911 that are possibly guilty of a crime, they almost act hysterical because that's what they think they should be acting like. And look, I can't say for certain, but if one of my loved ones died and they have the 911 tape of me calling 911, I'd probably be criticized for being overly calm. But that's because in any of these emergency type situations, the best thing you can do is to try to stay calm.
Right. The other thing, too, is don't kill your girlfriend, right? So then you don't have to figure out how to act on the 911 call. I'm not saying that that's 100% what happened here. We want to go through all of the information first before we give an opinion. But, yeah, I think in any scenario where people are suspicious, I'm to the point, Captain, where I think I've heard enough of these 911 calls, and I don't think it matters if you're over the top hysterical, if you're completely calm, somewhere in between. I think if people are suspicious of you, they're going to be suspicious of you hearing that call. Having said that, I think now's a good time to play that 911 call.
911.
Hey, please get someone to my house. It's 4700 Sherlock Place.
What's going on?
Please, my girlfriend, I think she just shot herself with blood everywhere, please.
She what?
She shot herself. Please.
Okay,
please get someone here. Please. Okay, let me tell you the truth. I'm Deputy Banks with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. I work with y'all. Get someone here now.
Okay, I need you to calm down then. You know how it goes. What's the address?
4700 Sherlock Place.
Okay, what's going on there?
My girlfriend just shot herself with my CC weapon. Please get someone here now. Please.
Sir, we're doing that while I'm talking to you. Is she still breathing?
No, there's blood coming out of everywhere. Please.
Okay, so she's not breathing.
Call dispatch on TAC 2. Get them here now. I understand.
Sir, they are on the phone. I need you to calm down. Calm down for me, okay?
You don't understand.
We're coming as quick as we can.
Please get someone here.
Jeremy.
Again, to me, this is somebody making a 911 call and going, how am I supposed to act? Because he comes in, you can't understand a word he's saying. He's shouting the address, and when they start calling him ma'am, it's almost like it pissed him off. And then he's like, and then he's it's a Freudian slip, but he says, let me tell you the truth. And he says, and then he's like, I'm one of you. And he calms down. Now he's telling you the information you need to know. Now, here's my problem. If you're not in law enforcement and you are hysterical and you don't know how to calm yourself down, that would make some sense. But this asshole is trained. He's trained as a deputy. He has to call in. How many times has he showed up to a scene that there's an emergency and he has to be professional and get the information to the people? And he knows how important that information is. So he has training in CPR and in medical things that he could have done to help save his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, however you want to look at it. But he also has training on how to give information to dispatchers. And it's like he doesn't use any of that training. But I think it's on purpose that he's not using any of that training.
Agreed. I mean, you don't want, if he is guilty of shooting his girlfriend and ending her life, he doesn't want to save her or help her or provide help to her, be it through somebody else.
Right.
Because then we now have a living witness who can tell us, okay, Jeremy may be telling you this story, but here's my story. And by the way, I'm the one that took the bullet. So the thing that's incredibly weird to me, there's a few things that jump right out that tape, right off the tape there. First off, I think my girlfriend just shot herself, is the way that he first explains it. Yet when he talks to Detective Hines an hour and 25, 30 minutes later, he's saying, I heard the pop and I knew what it was immediately.
Right.
He then tells Detective Hines that he kicked in the door and he finds her after hearing a second pop, and there's blood coming out of everywhere, according to what he says on 911. So look, I know he lives on a street named Sherlock Place. It does not take Sherlock Holmes to figure out if you knew what that pop was immediately, like you told the detective later, and you kick down the door and she's on the floor and blood's coming out of everywhere. It's not, I think my girlfriend shot herself. It's my girlfriend shot herself. So that's a weird way of kind of delivering or not fully delivering the information like you're saying, Captain. But then I'm not the only one hearing how drastically his voice changes when he's called ma'am a couple of times.
Bingo.
And it's like he using a different voice on purpose in the beginning?
He was acting.
Was he acting?
I'm an actor.
And then his voice changes completely when he's called ma'am. It's almost like you hear the bonehead, meathead, 23-year-old dude coming out in this guy.
Douche.
And it's almost like Eric Cartman, you will respect my authority situation, where it's like, hey, not only am I a man, it's sir. And not only is it sir, but I'll tell you the truth. I work with y'all. I'll tell you the truth. So you weren't telling us the truth earlier, or you were purposely concealing this, which we now know is fact. He was purposely concealing his job, his job title and who he works for in that call, per what he tells Detective Hines, his friend, who's being extremely casual and cordial with him in the moment. He tells her that he was attempting to conceal his identity in that 911 call.
There are many reasons why Simply Safe is trusted by experts and customers alike. In fact, U.S. News recently named Simply Safe the best home security system of 2023. And CNET recently awarded them with their editor's choice for home security. Simply Safe is designed with cutting-edge technology and backed by a 24/7 professional monitoring. In an emergency, agents use Fast Protect technology only from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so that you can get priority police dispatch. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs under $1 a day, less than half the price of traditional home security systems. You can lock and unlock your doors, access your cameras, and arm and disarm your system from anywhere. We here at the Garage love Simply Safe. We use Simply Safe to protect the garage studios, but also to protect our homes. And it's so easy to set up. If the captain can do it, you can do it. And I love the fact that I can unlock and lock doors anytime, anywhere. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/garage. Go today and claim a free indoor security camera plus 20% off your order with interactive monitoring. That's simplysafe.com/garage. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
Want to learn a new language this year? Rosetta Stone makes it easy to get started, and they'll create a learning plan for you that keeps you on track. Rosetta Stone has been the expert in language learning for 30 years, helping millions of people build the fluency and confidence to speak new languages. Rosetta Stone offers 25 languages from Spanish to Chinese to Polish. With the Rosetta Stone app, you can learn anytime, anywhere, at home, while traveling, or on your commute. You won't be overwhelmed because Rosetta Stone breaks down your new language into bite-sized pieces. Plus, Rosetta Stone's True Accent feature helps you perfect your pronunciation. You'll get feedback on how well you said specific words compared to native speakers. For a limited time, True Crime Garage listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime unlimited subscription, which gives you access to all 25 of their languages forever for 40% off. Visit rosettastone.com/garage today. That's rosettastone.com/garage. Rosetta Stone, how language is learned.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding. Because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. That's why I love BetterHelp. I'm learning about my boundaries, when to say no, when to say yes, when to take chances, and how to set up my goals and achieve those goals. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. BetterHelp has changed my life. Talk therapy has changed my life. I don't feel like I'm struggling anymore. I feel like I'm striving towards a better me. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/garage today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage. If you want a deeper understanding of yourself, check out BetterHelp today. All right, we are back. Cheers, mates. Hang on to the edge of your seats. This is going to be a wild one.
The attempting to conceal his identity is very
fishy,
incredibly strange to me. It's just and here's where my head goes with it. That is he thinking that if I don't say that on the 911 call, if I don't let the operator know who I am, what job I hold, I know that somebody from the sheriff's office that I work at will be responding to the scene and likely may be the very first person on the scene. Can I tell them what went down according to me, Jeremy Banks, and they buy it hook, line, and sinker and then tell it to the other people that respond, and now I've just controlled the narrative. And by the way, I've controlled it in a controlled environment that is not outside of the people responding and showing up to my home on this night. Instead, he slips and he lets out his job, and now maybe this became something bigger than he wanted from Jump Street. What we do know that does happen 100% is that St. Johns County Sheriff's Office kept the investigation in-house. Very quickly, they are saying it was not an officer-involved shooting. This situation was a suicide.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with them staying on the investigation, but maybe bring in a separate entity right away to double check your work. Even if it's just one or two officers from another department, they can come in and double check the work. But I think there's enough contradicting storylines and narratives that Jeremy Banks is telling the officers, and his erratic behavior when she seems to be, and their erratic behavior when it seems like there's a chance that she could live. I think that's enough red flags. And then if you go back and listen to the 911 tape, and he told you he's concealing his identity, but then you can hear it so drastically. So he's putting up a front. He is lying to the dispatchers. For what reason? You have no reason to lie to the dispatchers if your girlfriend actually shot herself. And I also thought it was an interesting line, two lines you pointed out when he said, I think she shot herself. And then he says, she shot herself with my gun.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, but the end of that 911 call, he is asked a direct question of, is she breathing? And he says, no, there's blood coming out of everywhere.
Right.
Is that what he says? Is my recall correct there?
I believe you're correct.
So
you're correct, sir.
Again, he's trained, and even if you're not trained, I can tell you this from my days working security and responding to accidents and certain situations, a lot of times you do not need to hear or check to see if someone's breathing, to know that they are breathing. Because in a situation where somebody is severely injured, they sound different than when they are not injured, when they are breathing. So it's a gurgling noise. Right. It's a very obvious situation that their lungs are going up and down. Now, it's very interesting to me that he says, no, she's not breathing. There's blood coming out of everywhere. All right. Okay, given the wounds, and we'll go through some of the autopsy information here as we continue on, I would expect some blood to be coming out of everywhere. What I'm getting at here, Captain, is given where she was shot or shot herself, I could give him the benefit of the doubt if he just did not know that she was breathing. I'm not saying that she was. What I am saying is that when EMTs arrived on the scene, what do we know that they did? They attempted to save her life for 23 minutes.
Right.
What is missing from the public information about this investigation? And oh, by the way, if you don't rule it a homicide, if you rule it a suicide, then all of this should be public knowledge. This should be public information that we all have access to. What's missing from this investigation? I want to know from that EMT, from that paramedic, the first one on the scene, when you got to Michelle, was she breathing? Because if she was, he tells the 911 operator, no, she's not breathing. There's blood coming out of everywhere. Guess what? Where she was shot, there would be blood coming out of her nose and mouth because of her breathing and attempting to breathe. And he would know that per not just his training, but any human with eyeballs would recognize that.
Well, no, and to be fair, maybe he's just in a state of shock. Okay, give you that one. And I can give him this idea that, look, we all have been trained to do things. I've brought it up many times on the show. You're trained as a banker what to do when robbed. Most of the time, when you are robbed, you do nothing that you were trained to do because you're in shock. Okay, fair. So that's why you didn't go to her aid and you didn't try to start doing CPR or any emergency measures to try to save her life. But then you called 911 because you're like, I can't help her. I'll call 911. Okay, fine. But then when you call 911, you have training of how to talk to dispatchers, how to try to remain calm during an emergency. And you didn't do that. And you actually tried to hinder the process. It's, and I would like to know roughly what the time of death would be, because I wonder, did he pause? Did he walk around the house? Did he sing 99 bottles of beer on the wall before he called 911 to make sure by the time that the EMTs got there that she wouldn't be breathing?
Right. She was pronounced dead at 11:48 p.m. And remember, the call came in at approximately 11:20 p.m. that night, and we have deputies arriving on the scene at 11:25 p.m. We have Deputy Maynard, who says that she was there by that time, and when she arrives on the scene, there's already Deputy Jonathan Holly, who is present on the scene at that time. So very quick and a very decent response time there. The other thing, too, Captain, you're hitting on some things here, may have been trying to control the narrative. A couple things I want to point out about his interview with Detective Hines is in that initial interview, he says, he tells Detective Hines, and this is where he may have been trying to control the narrative, because, again, we only have one person to tell us what was going on in this scenario. And maybe he's trying or attempting to present evidence of a suicide or her suicide. So, for example, he tells Detective Hines that the last thing he said to Michelle before he went out and sat on his motorcycle was, quote, "I love you. Please don't do anything stupid." Now, he said earlier that evening when they were fighting that Michelle had told him or said to him, quote, "You make me so mad, I want to kill myself."
Yeah, to me, that sounds like he's controlling the narrative or trying to. Let's just talk about it. Look, statistically, women are less likely to kill themselves by gunfire. So, and I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it's also strange that he is drunk or at least heavily intoxicated. Where's he going to ride his motorcycle to?
He was not going to ride the motorcycle anywhere. He was just sitting on the motorcycle.
So he's just sitting outside trying to chill out.
Trying to cool off, according to what he was saying.
But even his statement when he walks out and he says, well, don't hurt yourself or don't do anything stupid or whatever his comment was. To me, that almost implies that he was heading off to go somewhere.
So the death scene quickly became chaotic and confusing, as we can imagine here. Everyone from the St. John Sheriff's Office showed up to offer condolences and moral support to their fellow officer, Jeremy. His family and friends arrived as well. He talked quietly with his stepfather, who is a deputy sheriff from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. This before he was interviewed about what happened that night. And when he was interviewed in a cop car by a colleague, Detective Hines, as we already pointed out. Now, after Michelle's body was cleared, the house was sealed up for crime scene techs to pour over. But they didn't do much in the way of investigating as far as I can see. Jeremy said that it was a suicide, Officers at the scene said Michelle had a gunshot wound through the mouth, and the gun was found right next to her. They noted a bullet buried in the floor right next to where Michelle's right arm had been. And these parts of what they're seeing at the scene is and was consistent with Jeremy's story, that he had heard 2 shots. Now, crime scene photos show Michelle lying sprawled on the floor, and the positioning and the details of the gun are of interest. The gun, a Heckler & Koch .45 caliber pistol, is lying on the carpeted floor. It's got an attached tack searchlight. The tack light is on. The St. John Sheriff's Office concluded that Michelle may be unfamiliar with weapons and not used to handling them, had accidentally turned the tack light on as she used the gun on herself. Further, disciplinary records show that Jeremy was known for failing to secure his gun in the past. He openly has admitted that sometimes after work, he just dropped his gun belt on the floor where anyone could get at it.
Well, that's safe.
I want to point something out here. Regardless of what happened in this situation, if Michelle did kill herself, if Jeremy is not responsible for her death, leaving your service weapon unsecured in a house that has a child in it, this is not a good police officer.
No, he's a douchebag. And on top of that, just think about this for a second. You have this conversation on the way home. You guys are talking about ending the relationship. She has made some comments to you that you think are alarming, that you're later going to tell people about in these interviews. So instead of walking out to the garage and sitting on your motorcycle, when he says, "Oh, don't do something stupid or don't do something to harm yourself," you'd think at that point he would go figure out where his gun was and make sure that it was locked away and secure.
Very quickly, the sheriff's office wrapped up the investigation at the scene. Michelle, despondent over the breakup, had taken her own life, I guess would be the conclusion here. Now, we do have some of the detectives that are backing up that conclusion. So we have one that says, quote, "For her to stand still and allow someone to put a firearm in her mouth is ridiculous." That came from Eugene Tolbert, who was one of 2 detectives on the case. Tolbert said every time anything came up that looked inconsistent with suicide, there was something to explain it. His partner, Detective Hines, said in a recorded interview, quote, "I didn't have any suspicions that it was anything other than suicide. I think that's what we were all kind of discussing, but just making sure that we covered our bases," end quote.
Yeah, but their investigation that night is roughly 3 hours. It takes them roughly 3 hours to state that this is a suicide. And again, if it is a suicide, then the case is closed and all that information should be released to the public. But if I'm in charge and everybody at the crime scene or my coworkers are saying, "Look, Chief, this is looking like a suicide to me," I'd go, "Yep, okay. Well, let's wait till the coroner report. Let's keep the scene under lock and key. And then if that's our finding, let's bring in another department and have them double check our work. And then if we still rule it a suicide, again, then we can take our information and the information from the other law enforcement source and release that information. Because that's what you owe it to Michelle's family."
Well, and you could also go into Eric Cartman mode and respect my authority. It's not chief, it's captain. All right?
Right. It's sir, goddammit.
There are so many ways, and keep in mind here, the sheriff in charge of St. John's, he's been around the block. He's been elected sheriff time and time again. He can call in a favor. He knows people. He knows the other sheriffs in the surrounding jurisdictions. He could call in and say, "You know what? Can you send a couple people out here?" Even if he wanted his team to work the case or work the scene,
right,
send some people out as witnesses, or send some people out to get involved or be a part of the investigation. The proper thing to do would be to hand it completely over as quickly as possible as you can to another agency.
Yeah, but I could see, because you're the responding officers, I could see why you would just stay in charge and bring in some outside sources as basically checks and balance system.
I'm going to continue on with the information that the sheriff's department, the sheriff's office, has put out there in regard to the situation and their ruling of a suicide. They go on to say that Michelle had no bruises on her body. There was no disarray in the house or evidence of a struggle. Obviously, anybody that's dove into this case knows that there was a cut over Michelle's right eye, but this is explained away by the sheriff's office, saying that it could have happened as she fell after shooting herself, which does not go with even the initial autopsy findings. The initial autopsy findings state that she was either kneeling down, sitting, or lying on the floor when she shot herself. Her falling, I guess maybe even if she was kneeling or sitting up, that's what they're saying, where the right eye cut could have come from. And we'll get into this cut a little bit more, because there are some scientific findings that change throughout this case, but this is their initial reaction to that. Their other reaction to that cut is also that it could have been the result of the positioning of the gun, which one expert is telling us may have been upside down. And you talk about statistics, Captain, where they say that it is less likely for women to use a gun to commit suicide. One stat that is weird is that it is very common that when a gun is used in a female suicide, that they tend to use both hands. And so this other expert is saying that he believes that she was holding the gun with both hands. And one argument that the family has always had was that, look, she was right-handed. The gun's found near her left hand. Well, this might explain away that scenario, because they're saying she would not have used her weaker, less dominant hand. And the experts are saying, well, she probably used both hands and the gun was upside down. Now, they go on to say that the recoiling of the gun after the shot could have created that cut, which is very difficult to believe, because a gun doesn't recoil forward. It recoils backward, away from where the shot's fired. So that doesn't ring true. It rings less true to me than the idea that it would have moved forward and created this bruise/cut above her right eye. The other thing, too, that I want to point out and make perfectly clear, if we were reviewing a homicide case,
yes, sir,
or a child abduction case, which we do a lot of those here,
right,
we always talk about motive, even if we know who the perpetrator was, or even if we don't know who the perpetrator was.
Right.
We talk about what could be the possible motive in those scenarios. Well, let's talk about what could be the possible motive for her to commit suicide. Because I couldn't find it.
Yeah, my issue here too is, like, if her friends and family are telling us what's correct, and now this is not information that the deputies got right away, and this is not in their report of them claiming it's a suicide, because they just didn't do their work to interview and talk to everybody. But when you talk to the friends and family, and they say, well, yeah, she was planning on ending this relationship but going to the concert anyways. So the fact that she would be so distraught over this breakup that she was planning to initiate doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's almost like, I mean, take another suicide scenario. Man loses his job, he's distraught, goes home and kills himself. Most of the time, a man doesn't quit his job and is so distraught that he quit his job to start a new life that he goes home and kills himself.
Yeah,
it doesn't add up.
if it's reactionary because it's something that is out of your control. Right? Being fired from your job opposed to willingly quitting your job. Where here, it doesn't make any sense. Even the wording that he says, she told me, you make me so mad that I want to kill myself. Okay, let's set that aside for just 1 second and examine that in just a minute.
That's one of the dumbest statements ever.
First of all, she told people in advance, I'm breaking up with him this night. Tonight, after the concert, I'm breaking up with him. How do we know that happened? Because several people told her, you know what, maybe you probably shouldn't go to the concert.
Right.
This seems like a big deal. Maybe you shouldn't go to the concert. Fill in the blanks here for people that don't know the case. I get why she went to the concert. She paid for the tickets. Concerts aren't cheap. And on top of that, it wasn't just Jeremy and Michelle going to the concert. It was 3 couples.
Yeah, very good point.
So this was like a group event. Why not go and have a good time, or at least attempt to? You've only been with this guy for, his own words, a year and some odd months. Live-in girlfriend for over a year. This is not like love of your life scenario.
Well,
and again, she knows that she's going to break up with him. It's not something that is out of her control. She could have chose to do that at another time. She has a daughter. She's a good mother. I could see no reason for her to kill herself. And then let's say that for some reason she did say to Jeremy, you make me so mad, I want to kill myself. Well, doesn't that sound like a vengeful, angry thing? Wouldn't you do that in as much of a way possible to hurt him?
Right.
Out of anger? I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on suicide, but I would think that would involve something a little more up close and personal than locking yourself in a bedroom while your ex-significant other is who knows where.
Yeah, I get people's argument of if you're going to break up with Jeremy, that you don't go to the concert with him. But if he's planning on going to that concert with you, and then you then tell him, hey, I'm going to take somebody else, we know that this guy has been violent or physical towards her based on what her friends and family have said. We know that they've had very heated arguments, that people, when she's talking about her relationship to friends and family, they all know that it's more argumentative than a positive. It's more of a negative relationship than a positive relationship. If you don't go to the concert with Jeremy and you go with somebody else, or just go by yourself, you're running the risk of him calling, harassing you, and ruining your experience when you spent the money on these tickets.
Now, I will say there are some weird text messages from Michelle's phone that night, and nobody is disputing that these texts come from Michelle herself. And these, to me, would make me call into question the idea of suicide here. So she had sent some text to her friends and some of her family that night. This is on the way to and from the Paramore concert that she and Jeremy went to. So she texts her friend Mindy Fox at 8:14 p.m. saying, quote, I'm stressed out. She texts her sister Christine shortly before 9 p.m. saying, promise me one thing, Lexi, which is her daughter, will be happy and always have a good life. Now, we should note here, because I'm sure some people were asking this question, Lexi is her daughter from a previous relationship, not Jeremy Banks' daughter.
Right, I believe she's 8 years old at the time.
Her sister, responding to the text, comes back with, promise you what? ? And Michelle responds that no matter what, Lexi will always be safe and loved. Michelle responded, make sure Lexi is number one, not like us. Her sister responds, what's going on? I'm scared. So I'm not the only one that thinks that these texts are weird. Clearly her sister does as well. Now, a text to her brother Scott, Michelle wrote at 10:06 p.m., Lexi, never forget. Now, to some of the investigators, these texts were as good as a suicide note.
I think you can make an argument either way. I think you could say that these sound suicidal and that she's possibly going to do something to herself. And I think you can make the argument that they sound like somebody that's now in a difficult situation or maybe an abusive situation, and she's afraid for her life.
Yes, I wonder here if this, while it sounds like she may know that the end is near for her, so that would point towards suicide, you could flip the coin and it land on the other side to me, which would say maybe she's experienced some physical abuse from Jeremy Banks or was concerned that that's the level that this thing could get to and escalate to tonight. And I'm just doing the motherly thing and making sure that I've circled the wagons and my friends and family have my back and my daughter's back. And I know that no matter how this ends for me or what comes of tonight, that my daughter will be taken care of. Hell, who knows? A lot of times in these situations, yes, we do have an abuser. But there are some times where we have situations where people just physically fight each other. And that to me is very different than abuse. Who's to say that it's never come to that for them? Who's to say that these strange texts don't mean, well, if I end up in jail tonight because I got to defend myself or because he and I sometimes get into it in the worst way, will my daughter be taken care of tomorrow and the following day and the day after that until I can figure this thing out? As said, the investigators believe these texts were as good as a suicide note. We know that based off of what the sheriff in charge said in his report. And then we also have the St. Johns County medical examiner who seemed to agree because the cause of death was ruled a suicide and an intraoral gunshot wound. This was the ruling by Dr. Frederick Hoban, who issued the determination. And on the autopsy worksheet, the doctor's notes say under how injury occurred, quote, decedent shot herself with an HG, meaning a handgun. One thing that is weird, we keep citing statistics here, but one thing that is weird that we should know is that an intraoral gunshot are almost exclusively suicides. So just within hours of the shooting, a St. John's Sheriff's Office deputy went to Michelle's sister's home and said, well, the investigation is done, it's a suicide, and no other explanation was given.
I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the garage. So much more to get to. Join us back here in the garage tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. And until then,
Be good, be kind, and don't litter.